from New York, Mr. Nadler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Berman, it's my understanding that in most recent administrations, the President took the advice with respect to pardons and clemencies from the administration of the pardon attorney until Mr. Trump took only 1/8 of his pardons from the pardon attorney, and the rest depended on someone who knew him and recommended it to him. Is that the case, and how has President Biden handled it?
That is my understanding of the way things were processed in front of President Trump. And
what about previously?
Previously, there was an inclination to go through the pardon attorney's office, though I share, and I think the other witnesses here agree, that that's been a broken process, that the Department of Justice, try as it might to have a pardon attorney office that isn't conflicted out by the fact that prosecutors are all around. But the reality is that office has not been providing sensible and effective and regular advice to presidents, really since it went inside DOJ. And that's where I think the flaw in the process is there. If I could just have one moment to describe what I've been working on with folks at Ohio State in Ohio. Governor Mike DeWine, when he was elected, he reached out to us, said he wanted to do the process of clemency better, to do pardons better, and that he wasn't getting a good pipeline of applications. And he worked with our university, the Drug Enforcement and Policy Center, also the Akron Law School Clinic, to build a pipeline where he announced criteria ahead of time that he cared about for a pardon. And then we worked on cases. Applications come to us. We judge them by the criteria. We have no bias. Law schools are independent, obviously, of the prosecutorial function. And that has been working incredibly well. Among the things that I've learned through this process is it's an incredible amount of work to build the file, to check records, to do everything that's necessary to put a really good file together for an executive official and say, this is a good case. And it's so much work. It's inevitable if you don't have a really well-built process. And do you think this shortcut it?
And do you think a similar process could work at the federal level?
I think it's worth looking toward, and I think it's something that this Congress can do in this process. Obviously, it's a presidential prerogative to do pardoning, but I think this Congress can and should be looking toward building that infrastructure, not leaving it to DOJ, not leaving it to back doors.
Thank you. Mr. Osler, Professor Osler, if President Trump wanted to make it so that Mr. Isformis was fully cleared of wrongdoing, could he have done that?
Yes, he could have pardoned the hung counts.
And if Mr. Isformis received a pardon for the conduct connected to the hung charges, would that have ended his criminal case?
If he'd gotten a pardon on the hung counts, yes.
And if President Trump had pardoned Mr. Isformis for the hung charges, would the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida be able to retry him on the hung charges?
No.
And if President Trump had pardoned Mr. Isformis for the hung charges, would he still be facing possible additional prison time?
No.
And are you aware of any cases like Mr. Isformis' case where a commutation is given but there are unresolved charges left outstanding in the underlying case?
I'm not aware of any, but I haven't done a systemic search.
Isn't it true that once a case is complete, courts typically require resolution of all charges either by retrial or dismissal? And Mr. Isformis' case was different because his case was still going through the appellate process?
Well, as I understand it, it's still they can seek cert on the appeal, so it's still in the appellate process.
And my last question is, the President's had broad clemency authority. It's challenging to sift through the many people who seek clemency to find those who are most deserving, obviously, and align with the President's goals in exercising clemency. And we see through this Isformis example that petitioners and those evaluating the petitions must be thoughtful and careful as they maneuver through the clemency process. What changes in these processes would you recommend to the executive branch?
Well, just in brief, Rachel Barco of NYU and I have proposed for years to have a presidential commission that would directly advise the president. My home state of Minnesota, just this last term, has adopted that system, changing our clemency system.
And how would that commission be appointed?
It would be by presidential appointment. And so, and there are certain balancing that you'd want to have in that of different talents and so forth would be by presidential appointment. And that's how it's conceived of in the Fixed Clemency Act.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you.